What's up guys, my name is Ace, and we are 1 month away from the release of Delta Force on console, and the beta, or tech test for that, is currently live, although it is a closed test, so you do need a code to get in. And I want to give a big thank you to Marksman. He reached out and provided me with a code for PlayStation, so I could check this out. And in today's video, I wanted to share some feedback, because I noticed right away some fairly big issues with the console version of the game, and primarily the controller support in the game. Thankfully, at least some of these issues seem very reasonable to expect some fixes to, and I really hope they manage to get on top of them before the console release, because I'm really rooting for this game to be successful on console. I hope it blows up there, but I fear if they don't get on top of some of these things, it's not going to be the smoothest launch. And let's just dive right into this with what I consider to be the biggest issue right now, and this is with the controller support, where if we don't see adjustments here, I fear it's going to be pretty quickly pushing people away that end up trying this out. And the first piece of feedback here is navigating menus with controller is pretty awkward and rough, and I've actually run into a few cases where I end up in a menu where I don't want to be in that menu, and I try to get out of that menu, and I don't know how to get out of that menu. I spam buttons trying to find what button combination I need to press to back out to the previous menu, and in some cases I just couldn't figure it out, and I've literally had to restart my game just so I could get back to square one in the menus. And that's clearly an issue. Menus should be intuitive to navigate. I realize there are challenges when everything was designed from the ground up for mouse and keyboard and being able to just click on things and not be limited by the number of buttons on a controller. But in its current state, it's quite rough around the edges. And I do think it's rough enough that it has the potential to be turning people away. However, the bigger issue is more gameplay related with the controller support. And this one could literally make the difference between this game succeeding or failing on console with controller players. And this is your character movement is binary. And that means when you move in a direction, you're either moving at full speed, given your stance and everything, or you're not moving at all. And again, this is a result of the game being created from the ground up for mouse and keyboard, and now they're trying to squeeze controller support into that, because this makes perfect sense with a mouse and keyboard, because with that, your movement is handled by your keyboard, and keys on a keyboard are either pressed or not pressed. It's binary, and therefore movement being binary fits perfectly with that input. With a joystick, on the other hand, this feels awful, because one of the key benefits of using a joystick is you have the ability to move a little bit or a lot, depending on how much you move the stick. And in its current state, this is going to have a massive negative impact on left stick aiming, which is a vital technique for a controller to make fine adjustments to your horizontal tracking at least. And the reason this is important is we have a lot less range of motion with our joysticks, so just using the raw right stick aiming or our character rotation, which is controlled by a mouse on mouse and keyboard, with just that one joystick, you don't have enough precision there. And even with aim assist being present, which it is in this game, it's not very strong, but it's there, this doesn't provide enough control, and that's where left stick aiming comes in. It's a technique that many people have adapted to over decades now in controller FPS games. And therefore, when you have that muscle memory for that built up, and they suddenly don't allow you to make any fine adjustments, it feels awful. And just for an example here, if you don't quite understand what I'm talking about, in essentially any other FPS game right now on controller, I could go into the finals right now, for instance. If I want to just barely move my analog stick, you can see I can just barely strafe my character really slowly, whereas when I fully deflect the stick, now I'm suddenly moving a lot more, and I've got control over every movement in between. This allows me to make those really fine left to right adjustments with my left stick, while mainly using my right stick for recoil control or the larger adjustments when I have to switch from one target to the next, or if they're running perpendicular to me, then yeah, that's where the right stick needs to come in a lot more. So hopefully this outlines how important it is to have that fine control with our left stick aiming, and it's currently just not possible in Delta Force on console. If you try to make that fine adjustment, even if you just barely touch the edge of your dead zone, even if you just have the tiniest amount of stick drift there, you're suddenly going from no movement at all to strafing as fast as your character can possibly strafe. And then if you want to correct back in the other direction, guess what? You're suddenly going back in the other direction as fast as your character will possibly strafe. So I do fear if this isn't changed before the release of the game, this is going to be a huge sticking point that immediately turns controller players away, or at least a lot of controller players. For me personally, I've been eagerly awaiting the console release of this game. I have been playing it on PC with mouse and keyboard, and I enjoy that, but I'm primarily a controller player, and I also tend to prefer playing on console, so I've been really looking forward to this. But if this doesn't get changed, I won't be playing this game, at least not on console on controller. I may still continue to dabble with it on mouse and keyboard on PC. because I genuinely do like the game, and that's the reason I'm talking about it here and providing the feedback on it. Thankfully, at least the issue is clear. I know exactly what is wrong with this, and it's something that should absolutely be fixable. Even within a month, I'm pretty sure this is something they should be able to get on top of, as long as they're at least aware of the issue. Now, I do want to be clear on this because I'm sure there's going to be some people saying, I played on controller and it was just fine. Yes, you can play on controller in this game. It is doable. You can absolutely make it happen. You can still get kills and hit your shots and play the game, but it doesn't feel good, and that's a big problem, especially for console players that are used to playing on controller, where there are several other games on the market that feel significantly better and don't have this clear issue. So why would they stick to Delta Force over those other games if the controller support doesn't feel good? So there we go. That is the primary issue that I really wanted to bring up in today's video. This one could absolutely be a deal breaker for tons of players out there. So I really hope they get on top of this one. Now let's move on to some other issues that I've noticed as well going into console. And the first big one that I noticed is there's no control over your field of view, at least in the beta build. I don't know if they have plans to add this to the full release of the game on console. Maybe we're just playing a limited version of the game, so we don't have access. But this quite simply doesn't feel very good, especially because FOV sliders, even on console, have become the norm in recent years. If this were like 6 or 7 years ago, I don't think this would be as big of an issue or as big of a complaint, but that's also because crossplay wasn't really a big thing 6 or 7 years ago. And as soon as we talk about crossplay, if you were to turn crossplay on with no FOV slider playing against PC players that do have an FOV slider, you are at a massive disadvantage for this one single reason alone. That's not to mention the long list of other reasons, but this one reason on its own puts you at a huge disadvantage compared to PC players. So I really hope we do end up seeing an FOV slider at launch for this, but I realize this is something that's much easier said than done. It's not as easy as just enabling an FOV slider and then expecting performance to be just fine. But this is a clear downside with the console version, in its current state at least. But on a similar vein, another thing I noticed right away is there is a hard cap at 60 FPS, at least on PS5 when I was playing. You can't get any better than 60 FPS. Now, it does seem to be at least a fairly consistent 60 FPS. And don't get me wrong, 60 FPS is fine, it's playable, it's okay, it's far better than 30 FPS at least. I can't even go back and play 30 FPS shooters because they give me a headache, but 60 just doesn't feel great. When again, the new standard for FPS games on modern consoles is generally offering 120 FPS support. So again, this is another area where I think a lot of people that are coming from shooters that have that support on console, and then they get into Delta Force and their frame rate is now half of what they've been used to, that's not going to feel great. And once again, this does bring up the topic of crossplay. I really wouldn't want to be turning crossplay on if I'm hard capped at 60 FPS playing against PC players that have at least a much, much higher potential frame rate. Is it a total deal breaker? No, not necessarily, especially if I just keep crossplay off. That's fine. I can adapt to 60 FPS. I can play 60 FPS as long as I'm playing against other people with those same limitations. That's fine, but again, it's not great. And then finally, I've got one last big issue that I've noticed. And I really think this one's primarily just going to be an issue with the beta build of the game or the tech test of the game right now. I don't necessarily think this is going to be as big of an issue at launch. When I hopped into my first game, I realized pretty quickly, literally every single player in the game, aside from me, was a bot. There were no real players, despite the fact that I'm not searching for the training playlist where it's specified it's you against bots, and that's where you go to like warm up and stuff. I searched for regular public matches, and to my knowledge, I was literally the only actual player in that game on either team. And that felt like a big waste of time. If I'm searching for a public match, I'm there to play against real people, to test my skills against real people, not to be playing against bots. Now, in a game like this with a fairly high player count per match, I think it's totally fine to maybe mix some bots in to fill up some spaces until they can fill the lobby. That's cool, but if you're going to do that also, bots should be clearly labeled, and that's another thing I noticed. They weren't labeling bots at all, so it wasn't immediately obvious looking at the scoreboard or the names as I'm shooting enemies, or the kill feed for instance, that I was playing against bots. It was simply their behavior that made it abundantly clear that they were all bots. And this is something I brought up in a recent video. This is a big issue with including bots into traditionally PvP experiences. If you try to hide them, it can severely diminish any sense of accomplishment or satisfaction from getting your kills. Because especially when it's hidden, you're left in the dark. You don't know if that kill you got was you outplaying a real player or you just simply shooting a target that's essentially just meant to be killed. Now, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to change their tune on hiding bots like they do. I think that is kind of a core part of how they handle their game, and they're probably not going to be changing that, but I'm at least hoping that with the release of the game, bots are going to be a lot more rare in regular public matches, if they're going to be there at all. I'd rather just not see them, especially if they're going to try to hide them from us. And there we go. That's pretty much it. That's going to wrap it up for my feedback on the tech test or beta for the console release of Delta Force. Overall, I'm still really looking forward to this game coming to console like I have been for many, many months at this point. I like the game, I like Delta Force, and I really want to see it blow up on console. In saying that, it's got some clear issues here. I'm hoping they can get at least some of these resolved, especially that controller issue with the binary movement. I think that absolutely needs to be adjusted. Otherwise, I have some pretty big fears that this game is going to flop on release for console. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts and opinions, and this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling right now leading up to the release of Delta Force on console? Are you guys planning on checking this game out when it comes? Have you been playing it on PC? Do you guys enjoy it? And for those that have you tried the controller support, and how do you feel about that? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.